There is a moment in every person's life when the people who were supposed to love them most reveal exactly who they really are. Mine came on a Wednesday night. I was lying in a hospital bed, machines breathing for me, tubes running in and out of my arms, and somewhere down the hall, my father was signing a piece of paper that was supposed to end my life. Not because the doctors told him I couldn't survive. Not because there was no hope. But because someone had handed him a bill. And he looked at that number, looked at his checkbook, and made a decision. Let her go. 3 words. That's all I was worth to him at the end. 3 words and a signature. My name is Maya Chin. I am 31 years old. I am a licensed physical therapist. I have spent 6 years helping people relearn how to walk, how to hold a spoon, how to hug their children again after accidents and strokes and surgeries. I have held hands through pain. I have cheered through first steps. I have cried in my car after losing patients I couldn't save. And the one night my life was on the line, my own father decided the cost wasn't worth it. But here is what he didn't know. He didn't know about the property on Birchwood Lane that my grandmother had quietly signed over to me 2 years before she passed. He didn't know about the document locked in an attorney's drawer that had my name on it and only my name. And he certainly didn't know that in exactly 72 hours, every single thing he had spent decades building, his reputation, his business, his standing in the community, would be completely gone. This is the story of what happened when I woke up. And what I did next. Before I go any further, if you are someone who believes that justice matters, that truth has a way of finding its way back to the surface no matter how deep someone tries to bury it, then this channel is for you. Hit that subscribe button right now. Every single week, we bring you real stories of betrayal, courage, and the kind of justice that keeps you up at night in the best way possible. You do not want to miss a single one. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's get back to Maya's story, because it is only just beginning. To understand what happened in that hospital, you need to understand where I came from. I was born with a condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Most people have never heard of it. The short version is this: part of my heart muscle was thicker than it should have been. Not visible from the outside. Not something anyone could see when they looked at me. But it was there, like a fault line under a city. And when I was 7 years old, it sent me to the hospital for 2 weeks and a procedure that cost my parents more money than they had planned to spend that year. My father, Howard Chen, was a man who believed in numbers above everything else. Not feelings. Not faith. Numbers. He ran a mid-sized logistics company, warehouses, freight, delivery contracts. He was good at it. Methodical. Disciplined. He kept a spreadsheet for every dollar that came in and every dollar that went out. And then I happened. I don't mean that with cruelty. I mean it as plainly as he always said it to me. You came at a bad time, Maya. We weren't prepared. I was 8 years old the first time he said it. We were at dinner. I had spilled a glass of orange juice and knocked it across the table and onto a stack of papers he brought home from work. I started crying immediately. I said I was sorry over and over. He picked up the papers, shook them out, set them aside, and looked at me with an expression I will never forget. Not anger. Not frustration. Just cold arithmetic. You know what your hospital stays have cost this family? More than we will ever get back. So please, be careful. I was 8 years old. My mother, Sandra, was different. She was warm and quiet and spent most of her energy trying to soften whatever my father said. She would come into my room at night and sit on the edge of my bed and say things like, "He doesn't mean it the way it sounds, baby." And I would nod and believe her because I wanted to. But she passed away when I was 16. Breast cancer, fast and devastating. And after that, it was just me, my father Howard, and my older brother, Derek, in a house that had never felt particularly full of warmth, but now felt like an empty warehouse. Derek was the son Howard had always wanted. Athletic, business-minded, practical. He went to work for our father's company straight out of college. He got the company car, the apartment subsidy, the salary that didn't require student loans. I went to physical therapy school on grants and loans I am still paying off today. Nobody questioned the difference. And for a long time, neither did I. Because there was one person in my life who made me feel like none of that was my fault. One person who never once mentioned the cost of my medical history or the burden I had supposedly placed on the family. My grandmother. Nana Ruth. Ruthchen was 81 years old, lived alone in a small brick house on Birchwood Lane in a town called Maplewood, 40 minutes east of where I grew up. She had a garden that she refused to give up on no matter how cold the winters got. She made soup from scratch every Sunday. She called me on my birthday every year at exactly 7 in the morning because, she said, that was the time she woke up and thought of me first. She was the only person in my family who looked at me and didn't see a number on a bill. She would squeeze my hand sometimes and say, "Maya, you are the best thing that ever happened to this family. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I would smile. I would say thank you. I didn't fully believe her. I should have believed her. Because 2 years before she died, Nana Ruth walked into an attorney's office with clear eyes and a steady hand and made sure that no matter what happened, no matter what my father tried, I would be okay. I just didn't know it yet. It was a Tuesday in November. I had finished a long shift at the rehabilitation center where I worked, 9 patients, 6 hours on my feet, a particularly difficult session with a 60-year-old stroke survivor who had finally, after 4 months, managed to lift his right arm above his shoulder. I had cried in the hallway after that one. Happy tears. The kind that sneak up on you before you can stop them. I was driving home on Route 9, heading south, about 12 minutes from my apartment. It was raining lightly. Not heavy. Just enough to make the road slick and the streetlights blur into soft halos. I remember thinking about what I was going to make for dinner. And then I remember nothing. What I was told later, pieced together from police reports and witness statements and the paramedic's own account, was this. A delivery van had missed a stop sign at a 4-way intersection. The driver had been working a 16-hour shift. He fell asleep at the wheel for less than 4 seconds. 4 seconds was all it took. The van struck my car on the passenger side, spun it across 2 lanes, and into a utility pole. I was unconscious before the car stopped moving. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes. They worked on me at the scene for 12. By the time I reached St. Emmett's Medical Center, my blood pressure had dropped to a level that the attending physician described, in his notes, as critical and deteriorating. I had a severe concussion. 3 broken ribs on my left side. Internal bleeding from a lacerated spleen. And because of my pre-existing heart condition, the one my father had resented paying for since I was 7 years old, the surgical team needed authorization for an expanded procedure that would take longer and cost more. Someone had to decide. My emergency contact on file, the one I had listed at my rehabilitation center job and never updated from when I was 22 years old, was Howard Chin. My father. They reached him at 9:47 in the evening. He arrived at the hospital at 10:15. And here is what the nurse's station log showed he did next. He did not ask for my room number. He did not ask to speak to my surgeon. He walked to the admissions desk and asked, and I am quoting the incident documentation here, "What is the estimated total cost for a patient in critical surgical care tonight?" The woman at the desk, a woman named Carmen who had worked admissions for 11 years and had seen a lot of things, told me later that she looked at him for a moment before answering. Something about the way he asked it gave her a chill she couldn't explain. She gave him a range. He nodded slowly. Like he was calculating something. Then he asked to speak to the attending physician. Dr. James Okafor had been a trauma surgeon for 18 years. He had operated under pressure, under impossible circumstances, under situations most people could not imagine. He was not easily shaken. But he told my friend later, the one who saved my life, that the conversation he had with my father that night was one of the most disturbing of his career. Not because of shouting. There was no shouting. Because of how calm it was. Howard Chin stood in the hallway outside the surgical consultation room, hands folded in front of him, and asked Dr. Okafor 3 questions. What are her long-term survival odds without the extended procedure? What is the projected cost difference between the basic intervention and the full surgery? And, is there paperwork I can sign tonight to limit intervention? Dr. Okafor told him that the full surgery gave me a significantly higher chance of survival. That without it, the bleeding could not be reliably controlled. My father nodded. He asked again about the cost. Dr. Okafor gave him the number. My father was quiet for a moment. Then he said, she's never been financially self-sufficient. Her medical history goes back to childhood. At this point, I think we have to be realistic. Dr. Okafor stared at him. She is 31 years old, the doctor said. She has a treatable condition. I understand that, my father said. But I am the listed next of kin. And I am telling you, do not escalate her care. Let the situation resolve naturally. Let the situation resolve naturally. That is what he said. He signed the do not escalate order at 10:58 that evening. Then he asked the desk attendant if there was a family waiting area with a coffee machine. He sat down. He drank a cup of coffee. And then, after about 40 minutes, according to the log, he left the building. He went home. He went to bed. He believed that by morning, the situation would have resolved itself. But here is what my father did not know. 3 years before that night, I had sat down with my best friend, a woman named Priya Nair, and filled out a healthcare proxy form. Priya had been pushing me to do it for months after a patient at our facility had nearly died because no one could reach a family member who was authorized to make decisions. You of all people should have this done, Priya had said. You know how fast things can go sideways. So I had done it. I had designated Priya as my healthcare proxy. I had given her a copy of the document. I had listed her clearly, name, phone number, relationship, in my employee file at the rehabilitation center. What I had not done was update the emergency contact listed in my hospital intake form. But a nurse named Gloria, a woman who had worked the night shift at St. Emmett's for 9 years, noticed something that changed everything. When she pulled my patient file after the D&E order was signed, she saw that my employer was listed as the Maplewood Rehabilitation Center. She made a single phone call to their after-hours line. The on-call administrator found my employee file in 4 minutes. Priya's number was right there. Gloria called her at 11:22 at night. Priya picked up on the first ring. Priya Nair had known me for 8 years. We had met in a graduate seminar on rehabilitation science, bonded over bad cafeteria coffee and the shared misery of anatomy exams, and had been inseparable ever since. She was the kind of friend who showed up before you asked. Who remembered the things you said once and forgot. When Gloria called and explained what had happened, the accident, the surgery, my father's decision, the order he had signed, Priya did not ask a single clarifying question. She said, I'm the healthcare proxy. I have the paperwork. I'll be there in an hour. She lived 56 minutes away. She made it in 49. She walked into St. Emmett's at 12:11 in the morning with her driver's license, the original proxy document, and a calm authority that Gloria later described as someone who had been waiting their whole life to walk into that room. She spoke to Dr. Okafor directly. She presented the proxy documentation. She authorized the full surgical procedure. And then she sat in the waiting room for the next 6 hours while the surgical team worked. She didn't call anyone. She didn't post anything. She just sat there with a cup of cold coffee and waited for me to come back. My father was asleep. He had no idea. Dr. Okafor and his team completed the procedure at 6:45 in the morning. I was moved to the ICU. I was stable. Sedated. Still unconscious. But alive. Priya called into work, told them she had a family emergency, and stayed. My father called the hospital the next afternoon, presumably to receive news of my passing. The nurse who answered simply said, Miss Chin is in recovery. She's stable. There was a pause on the line. She's alive? Yes, sir. She had surgery last night. She's recovering well. My father did not come to the hospital. He did not call again that day. And the next morning, while I was still unconscious, my father made a mistake so catastrophic, so reckless, so breathtaking in its arrogance, that it would undo everything he had spent decades building. He went to steal my inheritance. I need to stop here for a second because I genuinely want to know what you are thinking right now. If you were Priya, and you had just saved your best friend's life while her own father walked away, what would you have done next? Would you have called the police immediately? Confronted him face to face? Or would you have waited, the way Maya waited, and made sure every single piece of evidence was in place before making a move? Drop your answer in the comments right now. And if this story is making your jaw drop, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear these stories. Now, let's talk about what Howard Chin did while his daughter was unconscious. My Nana Ruth passed away 14 months before my accident. Quietly, in her own home on Birchwood Lane, on a Sunday morning in September, with the radio on and the kettle still warm on the stove. The hospice nurse found her in her armchair at 9 in the morning, and by all accounts, she had simply gone to sleep and not come back. She was 81 years old. She had lived a full and generous life. And she had, in her final years, made absolutely certain that the person she loved most in our family would not be left vulnerable. What I did not know, what no one in my family knew, was that 2 years before she died, Nana Ruth had visited a private estate attorney named Franklin Graves. She had not used the family attorney, the one my father had used for decades. She had found Mr. Graves through a recommendation from her church. She had paid for the consultation out of her personal savings account. She had transferred the deed to the Birchwood Lane property directly into my name. Handled through Mr. Graves' office. Notarized by his staff. Filed with the county. Clean and legal. She had also established a small trust, $74,000, saved over 40 years of careful living, designated solely for me. The will had been probated 8 months after her death. The deed transfer had been filed and recorded. Letters had been sent to my home address. But I had moved apartments 6 months before Nana Ruth died, and I had never received them. When Mr. Graves tried calling the number on file, someone, I will let you guess who, told him that Maya Chin had moved out of state and was not interested in being contacted. That was my father's voice on the line. He had intercepted the process. Not because he knew about the property. He didn't. Not yet. He did it instinctively, the way controlling people always do. He managed the flow of information because managing information was how he kept everyone in his orbit off balance and dependent. But when my grandmother's estate was being casually discussed among relatives after her death, a cousin mentioned the Birchwood Lane house. And my father, ever the calculator, filed that information away. He assumed the house was part of the general estate. He assumed, because he always assumed, that whatever existed in that family would flow toward him. He assumed wrong. And the morning after he believed I would die in that hospital, the morning he woke up to discover, to his complete shock, that I was still breathing, he did not go to the hospital. He drove to a document shop on the far side of town. He had spent the night forging a power of attorney using my signature from an old insurance form I had signed at 20 years old. He had a contact, a former business associate named Marcus, who ran a small notary service from the back of a shipping center, who had done questionable favors for him before. Marcus stamped the document without asking questions he already knew the answers to. My father drove to the county recorder's office. He filed a deed transfer for the Birchwood Lane property into his own name. By the time I opened my eyes 3 weeks later, the house had already been transferred. A home equity loan had been taken out against it, $240,000, and the money had been quietly moved to pay off debts my father had accumulated through years of private gambling that nobody in our family had ever known about. He had planned for every scenario except one. The one where I woke up and started making phone calls. I opened my eyes on a Thursday. The ceiling above me was white and flat and lit with the kind of light that tells you exactly where you are before your brain catches up. Hospital light. I knew it well. I had walked past rooms exactly like this one for 6 years, checked on patients, adjusted pillows, spoken in quiet voices about recovery plans and timelines. I had never been on this side of the ceiling before. My throat was dry and sore. My ribs felt like someone had wrapped them in a vice that was slowly being tightened. My left shoulder had a dull, distant ache that I suspected would become much louder once the medication wore off. But I was thinking clearly. And that, more than anything, felt like a miracle. Priya was asleep in the chair beside my bed. Her head was tilted to one side, her jacket bunched up as a pillow against the armrest. She had, I learned later, barely left the room in 3 weeks except to go home and shower and bring back clean clothes. I said her name. She woke up immediately. The way people do when they have been sleeping but not resting. She sat forward and grabbed my hand with both of hers. "Hey," she said. Her voice broke on that single syllable. "Hey. You're back." I squeezed her fingers as hard as I could manage. She told me, carefully and gently and in the specific order that she had clearly rehearsed, everything that had happened. My father's visit. The order he signed. Her drive across the city. The surgery. The 3 weeks that followed. I listened without speaking. My face was still. My hand in hers was still. When she finished, I was quiet for a long time. Then I asked her the question I needed answered first. "Do you have documentation of what he signed?" She nodded. Gloria, the night nurse, had filed an internal incident report. Time-stamped. Detailed. Every word my father had said to Dr. Okafor was recorded in official hospital documentation. And the proxy form? The one that overrode his order? Filed with the hospital, effective the moment I walked in. I lay back against the pillow. "Priya," I said. "I need my phone. And I need the name of a good estate attorney." She smiled. Not a happy smile. A warrior's smile. "I already found one," she said. "He's been waiting for your call." His name was Franklin Graves. And my grandmother had told him I would come. I was still in the hospital when I first spoke to Mr. Graves. He had a voice that was precise and unhurried, like a man who had read so many documents that nothing in the world surprised him anymore. He explained everything my grandmother had set in motion. The deed transfer in my name. The trust. The probate. The letters that had never reached me. The phone call where someone claiming to speak on my behalf had sent him away. He told me he had been concerned for months. I told him I had been in a coma. He paused. Then he said, "Miss Chen, I am very glad you called." He pulled the current deed records while we were on the phone. It took less than 20 minutes for him to find it. The property on Birchwood Lane had been transferred out of my name 3.5 weeks earlier. My father's name was now on the deed, along with a recorded home equity loan of $240,000. Mr. Graves' voice remained measured. But underneath the measured tone there was something sharper. "The power of attorney used to execute this transfer," he said carefully, "was not filed through my office. It does not appear in any prior record connected to your grandmother's estate. And the signature style on the document, compared to the original deed transfer we executed 2 years ago, is inconsistent." "It's forged," I said. "That is my professional assessment, yes." I asked him what needed to happen. He told me. Court motion to void the fraudulent deed transfer. Notification to the lending institution that the title was disputed and the loan potentially fraudulent. Coordination with local law enforcement regarding the forged document. And the notary who had stamped it, Marcus, would be named as a cooperating party in the investigation. "How fast can you move on this?" I asked. "I can have filings ready in 48 hours. Do it." I hung up the phone and turned to Priya, who had been sitting on the edge of the chair listening to my half of the conversation. "He went to the house," I said. Priya closed her eyes for a moment. "While you were here," she said. "While I was here." We were both quiet. Then I said, my father has been a deacon at Riverside Community Church for 12 years. They have a monthly business appreciation dinner. Every quarter, the local Chamber of Commerce gives him an award for community service. He is speaking at the next one. Priya looked at me. When? Saturday. 72 hours from now. She leaned forward slowly. Maya. What are you planning? I looked at the 4-line in my arm. The monitor beside my bed. The window with the gray November sky outside. I'm planning to tell the truth, I said. In front of every person who has ever believed him. Okay. I need you to do something right now. Share this video. Send it to someone who needs to hear this story. Because what Maya is about to walk into, still bruised, still healing, still carrying the weight of everything her father did, is one of the most extraordinary moments I have ever had the privilege of telling. And I want to know, are you on Team Maya? Or do you think she should have handled this differently, kept it private, stayed quiet, let the courts handle everything without the confrontation? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Now let's go to Saturday night. The Riverside Business Appreciation Dinner was held at the Lakewood Events Center on the east side of town. Circular tables with cream-colored tablecloths. A raised platform at the front with a podium and a microphone. About 130 people, local business owners, Chamber of Commerce members, longtime community leaders, people who had known Howard Chin for 20 years. He was receiving the Community Cornerstone Award that evening. It was the 3rd time he had received it in 8 years. His name was printed in the program. I arrived early. Mr. Graves was already there when Priya parked the car. He was standing near the entrance in a dark suit, his briefcase beside him, patient as stone. He had filed every motion that morning. The court had accepted the initial emergency filing before noon. He gave me a single nod when he saw me. I was walking slowly. My ribs still protested every full breath. The bruise along my temple had faded to a pale yellow-green. I had dressed carefully, simple black dress, the small pearl earrings my grandmother had given me when I graduated, nothing that looked like a performance. Because this wasn't one. I walked inside. My father was at the front of the room, already working it the way he always worked a room. Handshakes, shoulder pats, the broad easy laugh of a man who has never been questioned. He was in his element. Polished. Certain. He saw me when I was halfway across the room. For a fraction of a second, something moved across his face. Something fast and involuntary that he immediately buried under a wide smile. He crossed to me, arms open. Maya. He pulled me into a careful hug. I didn't know you were coming. Are you sure you should be up? You've been through so much, sweetheart. I'm okay, Dad. He pulled back and held my shoulders, studying my face with the expression of a deeply concerned father. We were all so worried, he said. Loud enough for the nearby table to hear. Every night, praying. I know, I said. He didn't catch the flatness in my voice. He never did. I took a seat at a table near the sidewall. Priya sat beside me. Mr. Graves stood near the back, briefcase in hand. The dinner proceeded. The MC from the chamber made opening remarks. 3 other awards were given out. Then the MC smiled and said the words my father had been waiting to hear all evening. And now, for the Community Cornerstone Award, a man who needs no introduction, Howard Chin. Applause. Genuine, warm applause. My father walked to the podium with the confidence of a man who had rehearsed this version of himself for decades. He adjusted the microphone. He smiled at the room. Thank you, he said. I have always believed that a community is only as strong as the people willing to show up for it. I have tried, for the last 20 years, to be one of those people. To be someone this community could count on. He paused. I want to dedicate this award to my family. Particularly my daughter Maya, who, as many of you may know, was recently in a serious accident. Watching her fight to survive reminded me how fragile everything is. And how important it is to hold the people you love close. More applause. I stood up. Slowly, carefully, because of my ribs. But I stood. The room noticed. My father noticed. His smile held, but something behind his eyes shifted. May I say something? My voice carried clearly in the room. I was not shouting. I was speaking the way I spoke, with patience. Directly. Without apology. The MC looked uncertain. Looked at my father. My father, because he could not say no in front of 130 people without it looking exactly like what it was, gestured toward the microphone with a gracious wave. Of course, he said. Come on up, sweetheart. I walked to the podium. He stepped aside. I looked out at the room. 130 faces. People who had given this man awards. Who had hired his company, attended his events, trusted his handshake. Thank you all for the warm reception, I said. And thank you for the prayers during my recovery. They meant a great deal. I paused. I need to make a small correction to what my father just said. The room went quiet. He mentioned watching me fight to survive. I want to tell you what actually happened the night of my accident, because the truth is a little different from the story that has been told. I felt my father take a small step toward me from the side. I kept my eyes on the room. My father arrived at St. Emmett's Medical Center at 10:15 on the night of my accident. He did not go to my room. He did not ask to see me. He went to the admissions desk and asked about the projected cost of my care. Then he asked to speak to my surgeon. And then he signed an order instructing the medical team not to escalate my treatment. Not a sound in the room. In his own words, documented in a hospital incident report, he told my surgeon, "She's never been financially self-sufficient. Let the situation resolve naturally." And then he went home. A woman near the front table covered her mouth with her hand. I am alive because a nurse named Gloria found my healthcare proxy document on file at my employer, called my best friend Priya at 11 at night, and Priya drove 56 minutes to the hospital and authorized the surgery my father had declined to approve. My father stepped fully to the microphone now. His voice was tight and controlled. Maya, this is not the place. You stood at this microphone a moment ago and told these people I reminded you of what's fragile, I said. I think they deserve to know the full story. I reached into the folder I had carried in with me. While I was unconscious in the ICU, my father visited a notary service and had a power of attorney forged using my signature. He then filed a fraudulent deed transfer and took out a $240,000 loan against a property my grandmother had left to me, and only me, in a legal will notarized and probated through an estate attorney. I looked at my father directly. He was standing very still. That attorney is here tonight. Every eye in the room moved to the back. Franklin Graves walked forward slowly. He set his briefcase on the nearest table, opened it, and removed a document. The original deed transfer, he said clearly. Notarized by my office. Miss Maya Chen, sole beneficiary. Filed with the county 18 months ago. He held it up so the front rows could see the seal. The transfer executed while Miss Chen was hospitalized, he continued, was based on a power of attorney document that does not exist in any record associated with the estate, and whose signature characteristics are inconsistent with the authenticated originals in my possession. A court motion to void the fraudulent transfer was accepted this morning. The lending institution has been notified and the loan is currently suspended pending investigation. The room was a wall of silence. Someone's water glass clinked softly against a plate. My father turned to the room. His eyes were scanning, looking for the familiar face that would anchor him. The trusted ally. The person who would step forward. No one moved. She's been through a trauma, he said. His voice was losing its smoothness at the edges. She's on medication. This is a private family matter being aired. You signed paperwork to end my life, I said. And then you stole my home. If you want to call that a private family matter, that is your choice. But these people have supported you for 20 years. They deserve to know who they've been supporting. The man who had been seated directly to my father's left, a man named Paul Garrison, who had been the chamber president for 7 years and had personally presented my father with his first Cornerstone Award, slowly pushed back his chair and stood up. He did not speak. He simply picked up his dinner jacket and walked out. 2 others followed. Then a woman at the center table whose husband's business my father had contracted with for 6 years. She stood, smoothed her dress, and left without a word. My father watched each person go. He was standing at the podium alone now, in the full light, in front of a room that had fallen completely silent, and the man who had spent 30 years constructing the image of a generous, faithful, community-minded leader, that man was completely gone. What was left looked older. Smaller. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. He looked at me. I did not look away. I gave you everything, he said. Quietly. Almost to himself. No, Dad, I said. You gave me a number. And decided it was too high. I stepped back from the microphone. I walked back to my table, where Priya was waiting. She said nothing. She just reached over and covered my hand with hers. And I sat down. The events of the next week moved quickly, the way things do when the truth finally stops being contained. The lending institution that had issued the home equity loan against my grandmother's property froze the account Monday morning. Their fraud department had already been notified by Mr. Graves' office the previous Friday. By Tuesday, an investigator had been assigned. The county court formally voided the deed transfer on Wednesday. My name was restored as the legal owner of the Birchwood Lane property. I received a call from Mr. Graves at 9 in the morning. It's yours, he said simply. As it always was. The police opened a formal investigation into the document forgery. Marcus, the notary who had stamped the fraudulent power of attorney, was named in the report. He hired an attorney within 48 hours and immediately began cooperating with investigators. He told them everything. My father was charged with fraud and forgery. His attorney arranged a plea agreement, full restitution, substantial fines, no custodial sentence given his age and lack of prior criminal record. But the terms were significant. He was required to liquidate assets to cover the loan he had already spent. The logistics company, the business he had built over 30 years, had to be sold to cover the restitution amount. The buyer was a competitor who had been trying to purchase it for years and was very happy with the price he got under the circumstances. The Chamber of Commerce did not renew his membership. The Cornerstone Award was quietly removed from their records. My brother Derek called me 2 weeks after the dinner. We had never been particularly close, but we had always been cordial in the careful, surface-level way of siblings who grew up in the same tense house and developed separate strategies for surviving it. He said, I didn't know about the DNR. Or the house. I want you to know that. I believed him. I know the way Dad is, he said. I always knew. I built my life around not looking at it directly. I know, I said. Are you okay? It was the most direct question my brother had ever asked me. I sat with it for a moment. I'm going to be, I said. He offered to come visit. I said maybe in a few months, when I was more recovered. We left it there. A small door, not quite open but no longer locked. My father called me once, 3 weeks after the dinner. I answered. He did not apologize. I did not expect him to. He was not a man built for apology. He was a man built for justification, for reframing, for finding the angle that made him the misunderstood protagonist of every story he was actually the antagonist of. He said he had never meant for things to go this far. I said, Dad. You signed a paper to let me die. Silence. That is as far as things can go. I hung up. I have not heard from him since. On a Saturday in early December, I drove to Birchwood Lane for the first time since Nana Ruth had died. The garden had gone a little wild. The lavender had spread beyond its borders, which is something lavender tends to do when no one is managing it. The rosemary near the front steps was still there, still alive, reaching toward the gray winter sky like it had been waiting for someone to come home. I parked at the curb and sat in the car for a moment. My ribs had healed significantly. I could breathe without wincing now. I could sleep through the night. My shoulder was still in physical therapy, a fact that my colleagues at the rehabilitation center found very funny, in the kind, gentle way that people laugh when they are glad you are still around to need physical therapy. I had returned to work part-time 3 weeks after being discharged. My supervisor had rearranged my schedule without being asked, kept my caseload light, checked on me quietly at the end of shifts. She was not demonstrative about it. She just made sure I was okay. That is its own kind of grace. I got out of the car. I walked up the path. I turned the key, in my door, and I stepped inside. Nana Ruth's furniture was still there. Her rocking chair by the window. Her bookshelf with the same 30 books she had rotated through for decades. Her small dining table with the slightly uneven legs she had never gotten around to fixing. On the mantel was a photograph I hadn't noticed on my previous visits. The two of us, at my graduation. She was holding my diploma with both hands and beaming as though she was the one who had earned it. I sat in her rocking chair. I did not turn on the television. I did not check my phone. I just sat in the house that she had quietly, carefully, lovingly made sure would be mine. Long before she knew she was running out of time. Long before she could have known exactly what kind of protection I would need. She had known enough. She had known my father. She had seen him, clearly and without the loyalty that blinds, and she had made a plan. She had believed in me the way I had not yet fully learned to believe in myself. I stayed until the winter light through the windows went gold and then gray. Then I put on every single light in the house, because it was mine, and I wanted to see it. There is something they do not tell you about the experience of nearly being lost. They talk about gratitude. And it is real, I will not dismiss it. There are mornings when I wake up and the simple fact of being awake still feels like something worth noticing. The light through the window. The sound of traffic outside. The weight of my own body in a bed that I chose. But what they do not always mention is the clarity. When you come back from the edge of something, when the worst thing has happened and you have survived it, you stop having patience for things that were never worth your patience to begin with. You stop apologizing for existing. I had spent 23 years apologizing for the cost of my own medical care. Accepting my father's accounting of my worth. Staying quiet at tables where I should have spoken. Making myself smaller in every room he occupied to avoid the arithmetic he was always running in his head. You cost this family. I heard that sentence so many times that it became the water I swam in. I stopped noticing it was drowning me. I am not angry at myself for that. I was a child who needed to be loved, and when children need to be loved, they accept the terms that are offered to them because the alternative, losing the person entirely, is too frightening to contemplate. But I am 31 years old now. And I understand some things I did not understand before. The people who truly love you, the ones who are safe, the ones who are real, they do not make you earn it. They do not keep a ledger. They do not remind you, at intervals, how much you have cost them. They are not silently calculating whether you are still worth the investment. My grandmother never once made me feel like a liability. Priya drove 56 minutes in the rain for me without asking a single question first. Gloria, the night nurse who barely knew me, pulled a file and made a phone call that saved my life. And none of them, not one, ever mentioned what it cost them. That is what love actually looks like. Not perfect. Not always easy. But it does not come with a running total. If you are watching this and you recognize something in this story, in the guilt, in the silence, in the bone-deep belief that you owe something to the person who keeps hurting you, I want to say this to you as directly as I can. You do not owe anyone your silence. You do not owe anyone your health. You do not owe anyone your future. And you absolutely, under no circumstances, owe anyone your life. Setting a limit with someone who has harmed you is not cruelty. It is not revenge. It is not dramatic or ungrateful or disloyal. It is the most basic act of self-respect there is. My father made his choices. Every single one of them. The gambling debts he hid. The order he signed. The deed he stole. He made those choices as a fully grown adult who understood exactly what he was doing. I did not cause them. I could not have prevented them. And I am no longer carrying them. I still live near the house on Birchwood Lane now. I am restoring the garden slowly, the way Nana Ruth would have wanted. The lavender is still spreading. I am letting it. I sit on the front porch sometimes in the evenings, with a cup of tea and a kind of quiet that used to make me anxious and now just feels like peace. And I think about my grandmother, who planned all of this from a quiet office across town, who never told me because she did not want me to worry, who simply made sure the door would be open when I needed it. She believed I would come through. She was right. I always come through. And so, if you are in the middle of something that feels impossible right now, if you are carrying weight that was never yours to carry, I hope you hold on to this. Someone out there has already filed the paperwork for your future. Someone has already believed in your survival before you thought to believe in it yourself. You just have to make the phone call. You just have to pick up. If Maya's story stayed with you, if something in it reminded you of your own fight, your own silence, your own moment of finally choosing yourself, then this community is exactly where you belong. Subscribe to this channel right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they are not alone. And leave a comment below, tell me about a moment when you finally stopped being quiet. When you finally said, enough. This channel exists for you. For the people who got back up. For the ones still figuring out how. Every week, we bring you stories of truth, justice, and the kind of courage that does not announce itself. It just shows up. We'll see you in the next one.